books down, and every single fantasy romance book I've chosen is somehow dragon coded, like dragon shifters or dragons as entities. So we are gonna be reading dragon themed fantasy romances this video. Bones were there. But the one scene that we do get leaves me feeling actually kind of sad for the girl. I'll be honest with you, the book did lose me in between. Am I halfway through this video project already? Yes. Have I not filmed the intro? Yes. Doesn't matter? No, it's my video. I forgot to film an intro. I just started filming the project. I didn't even register. Okay. Hi guys. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Khushi and today we are going to be reading a bunch of fantasy romances. I am in the mood. I wanted the war, the high stakes, the mayhem, the murder, the mystery. I want death, destruction, heartbreak, world building, magic systems. Like I want all of that, and with a nice sprinkling of romance. First book we started off because I've already read this at this point. I shall roll the clips for you after. But the first book is Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Yes. Dragons, dragon school, war, dragon riding, betrayal, death. I'm just throwing words at you at this point. I will tell you properly what Fourth Wing is about in the next clip. Ignore the eye bags, ignore the mess of the hair. Let's focus on the fact that I have finished Fourth Wing. Oh, the day has come. I can finally say that with the rest of the world, I also know what happens in this book. And you know what? I'll say it. I see it. I see why people have gone crazy over this series, this first book especially. I see why even people who don't enjoy fantasy got hooked on this, because there's pretty decent pacing. You don't feel bored at any point. You're always curious about what's happening next. I see it. And I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm not gaga over the book, I won't say, but I'm fairly happy with it. Like, I'm quite happy with it. Okay, so for those of you who don't know what Fourth Wing is, it's the first of its series, and it's technically set in this war school called Basquiat. In this world, there are dragons, there's a war going on, and a lot of people end up volunteering to become riders, but the training and process you have to undergo to become a rider is extremely dangerous. People don't even make it through the first week, much less the first year. On top of that, there's a good chance that dragons may just think that you're not worth the effort, or you're just not a nice person. It's all up to them, and they'll just casually breathe fire on you and you're dead. You just ash. They're really respected and a very important part of this country and its protection. So they essentially have the last say. So yes, our main character, Violet, she's trained all her life to be a scribe. Now, scribes are ones who keep the history of this country, who study, who are very scholarly, essentially. She wanted to be one of them. And her mother, who is a general, said, no kid of mine is doing that, and sent her off to this rider school, to Basquiat. And essentially we see her try and struggle and outsmart and outmaneuver her way through this experience. First things first, the thing I need to address is anyone who liked Dane, you can just click off the video now because I'm sorry. I'm part of the Dane hate club. I don't like this man. I think he's a horrible friend, much less any sort of love interest for the main character. Not Dane. We don't stand Dane here. What we do stand is Xaden. I will say though, Xaden is not going to replace Rhysand for me. A lot of people said there's a chance he could replace Rhysand. No. But he's a close second. We like Xaden. Xaden's interesting. Xaden's fun to be around. What we do stand, even bigger than that, is Taryn and Adarna, the dragons. Every person who's read Fourth Wing keeps talking about the dragons, and I agree. Terran and Adarna supremacy any day over anyone. Like, they are my favorite characters. There were so many twists and turns in this book that had me gasping and giggling, and I liked the pacing in this book. I am very curious about what happens in the second one, with especially with the way this one ended. Yes. Yes. Intrigue. The writing is engaging and it's not flowery. Don't get me wrong, I do love my purple prose, but that's not what we get here. It's straightforward, it's nice and simple. It just helps you battle through the story. I like the characters. I could picture everything vividly in my head. The action scenes were pretty nice as well. I wouldn't say I'm in love with Violet. Like, I think she's cool. Yes. What did I rate this book? That's a very interesting question. I think I rate this book 4 stars or 4.5. I know, maybe you're probably looking at me saying not a 5. I predicted quite a few things that were going to happen in this book, which is not a bad thing. I think that's just because I read quite a lot of fantasy and I understand the patterns and structures, and it's easy to predict when you know what you want happening in the book, but at the same time, when that's exactly what happens, you're just like, saw it coming. Not, there were some elements of that, I'll give it, but some aspects, I saw it coming, which is probably what takes away that 0.5 for me. The author does a pretty good job of keeping us engaged, entertained, wanting to see what happens next. We enjoy the action, we love some characters, and we absolutely hate some characters. And I think that's what makes this book fun, that and the dragons. I would recommend it. Especially if you are trying to get into fantasy, you don't know where to begin, or you really like the sound of a war school, death games, dragons, sexual tension, and enemies everywhere around you with very few friends to hold dear. If that sounds like your vibe, I recommend. A strong opening to this vlog, I will say. Presenting to you the next fantasy romance I'm going to be reading in this video. Fear the Flames by Olivia Rose Darling. I don't remember what it's about. Yes, it has been purchased, or it's in my Kindle Unlimited. I don't know. I will let you know how it's going in a bit. Alrighty. Fear the Flames. Completed. So, our main character, when she was born, her mother and father, the king and queen, put together this thing to celebrate her birth. And this witch sort of comes up and gives the child, or like gifts the child, 5 dragon eggs and says that there's this prophecy attached to her and she's the dragon queen, and her father, being the small insecure man that he is, throws this child in a dungeon. And Elowen is technically a prisoner and is raised in the dungeon. She's tortured, she's abused, because they are trying to get information out of her on how to break the dragon link, so that she doesn't ultimately grow up to become more powerful than her father. This goes on up until she's 8 or 9. She has not seen the world outside of her dungeon, literally. And she does not have the answer to break the dragon link either, because she doesn't. She's a child. When she hits 8 or 9, her uncle has had enough of this, and him and a couple of other guards sort of kidnap her and smuggle her out of the palace. She's grown up now. She's a warrior. She's learned how to defend herself. She's learning to deal with her trauma. She's also hearing the news that her father, the king of Emirat, is becoming very power hungry, very greedy, and is starting wars with multiple countries trying to take over their land. The story begins with her coming across the commander of the Varaveth army, who has his own plans and is looking for the lost heir. And they strike up a deal, which is essentially he will help her free her dragons, heist mode activated, and in return she has to be on their side of the war when they go up against Emirat. She's like, Coolio, that works. That is the premise of Fear the Flames. The bones were there. We were so close. The bones were there. The idea was there. The dragons were, well, They weren't really there in the story, but the idea of them was there. It just didn't come together in the book. It just wasn't there in the book. Look, I'll be honest. I didn't have a horrible time reading this book. It didn't completely drag. Like, yes, there were certain parts where I thought the pacing could have been a lot better. I wouldn't dissuade people from reading it. I wouldn't say it's a bad book because it wasn't. It was a decent read. But it could have been so much better. I honestly don't think I can give it more than 3 stars. Coming from Fourth Wing and being promised dragons, this book did not have dragons. Like, yes, some appearances, but like 70 to 80% into this book, and we still have not had the dragons. Maybe 80% is a bit much, but like 70% I can guarantee that we still had not seen the dragons. Even the heist, which is what led to us meeting the dragons finally, we barely spent time at the planning stage of it. We barely spent time during the heist, I feel. Like, we didn't have enough of the heist because that was the main point of the story. For me, it was the initial deal that they made. Everything that happened before was a lead up to the heist, and it didn't feel as big of a deal as it should have felt for me. A dragon heist sounded so sick, and I was so disappointed that we didn't get all of that. Even after the heist, we spent the next 90 to 100 pages doing after heist stuff, and I personally thought that whole bit was a bit dragged out. Like, it didn't feel like the right moment to be putting those things in. I will say, if you're looking for enemies to lovers, if you're looking for a good slow burn build up of a romance, if you're looking for dragon content, like Fourth Wing type dragon content, don't look here. Whereas if you are looking for the kind of book where he worships the ground she walks on, warrior x warrior romance, because yes, even though she is royalty, she's very much a warrior more than anything else, I will say go for this. And see, the thing with Caden, the opposite of Eloin in this romance, we don't get to know him as much as I would like. And another one of the main things that got to me during this reading experience was the writing style. I'll be honest, it wasn't for me. It felt very, how do I explain this? It felt very sort of melodramatic. The metaphors were just like, our main character Eloin would go on long tangents about the darkness within her. Like, a little bit of that in fantasy books adds to the spice. It's required. It's a fantasy book. You add that in once or twice, it adds a little bit of oof, pizzazz. But when you add it in repeatedly, it becomes a bit much, and then it loses its flair. It becomes almost funny, which is not the point of those monologues. It was happening so much, like the darkness awakes within me and surges forward, and I pull out my knives as the darkness answers my call. I will give credit where credit's due. It wasn't all bark and no bite. Like, we do see her darkness. We do see her trauma. We see her cruelty. We see her scars. But then my question is, if you can show it to us, then why do you have to tell it to us so much? Books and writing styles, liking them, not liking them, it's a very subjective experience. It's very hit or miss for people, and unfortunately, the writing style in this one was a miss for me. That was Fear the Flames. I give it 3 stars, but I also said it's not a bad book. It's a decent read. So that's that. Okay, I think I know what I'm doing. This is a TikTok approved fantasy romance, and we all know when TikTok approves, it's gonna be a great book. Okay, I'll be so honest. Majority of the books I've read based on TikTok recommendations have not gone well for me, but I'm curious. I'm curious to know what the people are liking these days. So I'm going to be reading the first book of the Kings of Avalier series. It's called The Last Dragon King by Leah Stone. Can you see it? I hope you can see it. I know nothing about this. All I know is at some point I downloaded it. I'll let you know how it goes. It's been exactly 1 day since my last update. Reading The Last Dragon King took me 1 day. About 300 and something pages, not a lot of brain power required, but unfortunately, I am so sad to report that TikTok did not deliver this time. In this story, we follow a main character who is a hunter-gatherer for her family. She spent all of her life believing that she doesn't have any magic and she's mostly human, up until this one day when the Dragon King and his entourage come to her village looking for women who have a lot of magic in their blood and who can survive marrying him and giving him an heir. Her mother pulls her aside and reveals secrets, and it's actually dangerous for the Dragon King to know about her actual bloodline. Anyway, the Dragon King's group finds out that she has a lot of potential when it comes to magic and takes her away to the capital, to his palace, and she is one of many women who then have to compete to get married to him. Sparks fly, there is a connection there. That's essentially the story. I went into this blind, like I told you. I didn't know what the premise was, and I did not end up enjoying the plot and the direction it took. Did not enjoy the chemistry. I don't think there was much chemistry there, and I did not like how the relationship was built. Was not convinced by the romance. Usually in books like this, which is heavily TikTok approved, there is quite a bit of smut in there, but that was not the case for this book. There was nothing there, which is fine for me, but the one scene that we do get leaves me feeling actually kind of sad for the girl. If you read it, then maybe you understand where I'm coming from. The story writing was so very convenient at certain points, and the character arcs didn't really arc. And on top of all of that, I could not get myself to care about any of the characters. I didn't hate the book. I was just so indifferent. I did not care. Nothing took my fancy. And I'm not trying to be harsh. For everyone who enjoyed the story out there, great. I just did not see it and I could not join the hype. So The Last Dragon King for me is a 1-star read. A 1.5, a 1. I'm trying to figure that one out. And I'm moving directly on to the next one, which is going to be the first book in of Dragons and Fae series. It's called Promised in Fire by Jasmine Walt. Once again, I'm going in completely blind. I don't know what this story is about. And I know after my last experience going in blind into a book, I probably shouldn't. I want something good. I want something that will make me go crazy in a good way. But I'm still gonna go in blind because I think that's also kind of fun. We'll see, like crossed fingers and all, but we'll see. Okay, Promised in Fire by Jasmine Walt. I have finished it. It was fun. If you're looking for a fast-paced adventure, just a bunch of stuff happening, just jumping from one problem to another, and I don't mean this in the bad way, like it'll keep your mind engaged. If you're looking for something like that, something that doesn't take a lot of effort to read, a quick read, Promised in Fire. I'll be honest with you, the book did lose me in between. But the starting was strong, and the ending, I was fairly enjoying it. That one particular incident in the ending I did not like. So, Promised in Fire. This story is set in a world with a pretty cool magic system. It's very Avatar: The Last Airbender, if you think about it, because there are the fire fae, there's the water fae, there's the earth fae, and there's the air fae. In that way, the magic system was just very reminiscent of a show I really love. So I was curious to see what they'd be doing with it, but they also have this element of shadow creatures and shadow magic, which is essentially black magic that's going around poisoning and tainting. Like if you're touched by shadow magic, essentially you start rotting. The political history is also pretty interesting because at the current time period, they're being ruled by this king who essentially eradicated all the dragons from this realm 20 years ago. Thousands of years worth of dragon versus fae war had been wrapped up. That gives us a very interesting premise and interesting opening because the last dragon who is left behind in this realm to protect the portal through which the rest of his dragon friends escaped through, he has been put to a deep slumber, and our main character stumbles upon him and wakes him up. Why did she wake him up? It's because everything she knew was a lie. She believed she had no magic at all. She was a water fae who was raised in a small earth fae village and always been picked on for being weak and not having any powers. She didn't have any control over her water magic. To make up for that, she trained herself physically, and she was physically quite the warrior. So she decided to try out for the army, but while she was trying out, something went wrong, and somehow she started spewing fire everywhere. Like, she had fire magic, which hasn't been seen in ages because the fire fae have all been wiped out at this point. So the army people who were there for the tryouts, they saw this, they immediately went, catch her, we need to take her to the king. She freaked out, she ran back home, she told her mother what happened, and her mother is like, yes, I've been keeping a couple of secrets from you. But before they could discuss said secrets and supposed prophecy, the general shows up in their house. The general and her mother get locked into a fierce battle where she realizes that her mother is not a lesser fae, she's a greater fae, she has a lot of powers. And how did she realize that? Because her mother essentially used a massive amount of magic to earthbend, essentially, and send her far, far away from the village. So once the earth spits her out, she's somewhere extremely far away and she's trying to find shelter, and this abandoned tower she finds is where the dragon has been sleeping. Anyway, so they go on this big adventure. She wants to save her mother, but a lot of stuff happens. Everybody is out on the hunt for her. Things are not looking very good for her. The situation, the romance is also quite complicated because the dragon knows that she's his mate, but she doesn't know that, and they are hell-bent on hating each other because dragon and fae and the history their people have with each other. So that's the story. My god, I took way too long explaining that. See, I would tell you this, emotionally we didn't get enough time in any of the adventures, between any of the adventures, to actually connect with these characters. It was just fun seeing all the action, but I didn't care as much, which is probably why in between I sort of just clocked off and I'm just like, It's like a movie you would watch once and it'd be like, that was fine, and then move on. You know what I mean? That's kind of what Promise and Fire felt like for me. The pacing honestly wasn't that great. Like, yes, if you're looking to get through something quickly, this will do it, but the story is told over a handful of days, I think like 4 or 5 days. We never really spend proper time with any one thing. One part where they sort of get taken to this harpy nest, and I was so intrigued because the harpies were set up so cool. I was so interested and I really wanted more time in that mini plot line, building up the cool things, building up the world a bit more, because I will give Jasmine Walt credit. It's a solid structure there. There's solid history there. A lot of stuff to work with, and even just within the romance, it's such an interesting position both of these people have been put into. Promised and Fire was 3 stars for me. I enjoyed the little adventures they went on. I just wish it was developed a bit more. In the romance front, though, I don't have much to say when it comes to Promise and Fire. I cared more about the world and the politics. We are gonna continue. I'm gonna read one more book. One last book. I'm gonna read one last book. And I would really like it to be higher than 3 stars, which puts a lot of pressure on what I'm gonna pick next. I don't know. You will see what I have decided to pick in the next clip. I finished it. I just reread the ending again because why not? I finished When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker. You guys, this book, that ending, wow. Like, it I had a good time. Let me quickly tell you what the story is about before I start talking about all the things that worked and didn't work. Um, oh, it's so complex. How do I explain this? So, we follow our main character, Rave, and she is part of and one of the top assassins of this rebel group called Fur du Ath. Obviously, I don't know if that's how you actually pronounce it, but she's sort of enslaved to this rebel group because they brought her out of like a really difficult place a few years back, and they offered her the option of getting revenge, which was something she really wanted at that point. Even though her relationship with her handler is not the best, she is happy to be part of this group because politically, ideally, she likes what the group stands for. She's very upset with the way the kingdom is being run and the royal family at the moment, and this group mainly opposes that royal family. Now, that's our main character. She's been doing the assassination thing for a while. She's damn good at it. She's powerful. She's badass. Recently, the royal family hired a bounty hunter to go after some of the members of her group. And it so happened that this bounty hunter was able to track her down. Things went very, very bad. While fighting off him and his group, ended up being captured. She's tortured. She's brutally beaten up and thrown into a dungeon, and they managed to find evidence against her and pin her to multiple assassinations that she has done. And they basically give her a death sentence. It was just a matter of how is she gonna die, and everybody voted for her to die by dragon, I guess, like being eaten by a dragon. And that's about the time when the male MC comes in because he finds her, and it seems that she reminds him of someone, or there is some sort of weird connection because he decides to help her, and the story starts from there. This is such a bad explanation, you guys, because there is so many layers that I am casually skipping over because I do not know if they qualify as a spoiler or not. Like, there is this whole concept of lost memory. There is the fact that she may or may not be housing like some sort of deep ancient entity within herself. It's great, but I don't want to spoil it for you, so I gave you like the cleanest possible version. It's okay, no more, because I will spoil the story and you really need to go in without knowing much, because I went in like that. And even though the last two times didn't work out that well for me, this was amazing. 4 stars or 4.5. I haven't decided. Don't ask me. But just like know it's up there. I had a good time. From the way the book started, the very first chapter, the very first few chapters, I was hooked. The myth, the lore of the world. I genuinely really enjoyed the thought and creativity Sarah A. Parker put into building all of it. It felt thought out. It felt like it was given time and we got to know all the aspects of it. Yes, it was a little info dumpy in the beginning or like in certain parts, but I am willing to overlook that solely because it was captivating, at least for me. The writing style is very poetic and lyrical, and sometimes the metaphors were a bit like oof, but I was still fine with it. Like, I didn't have too much of a problem with that. I even enjoyed it at times. The main character, Rave, is so interesting, and we are constantly wanting to know more about her because there are so many layers, there's so much to know, and you can't help that curiosity because you're not getting all of it and you really want all of it. There's so much history there, so much trauma there, and you cannot help but be curious and constantly need to know more, which is also why I flew through this book so fast, because I could not put it down. I just needed to know what happened next. I needed to know if we actually found out about the things I was curious about, the things that I predicted whether they were actually going to happen. I mean, even the male MC, I really enjoyed him. He was great. I liked the chemistry. I liked the pair up. We also get some chapters from his point of view, which you all know I love that. We get a little bit of a fated star-crossed lovers thing going on, perfect who hurt you vibes, and we get an emotionally open male MC, when the female MC is the one who's untrusting and prickly and spiky. And I loved seeing that dynamic. I loved seeing them together and watching her character growth more than anything. Yes, there were parts where I'm just like, yeah, the execution could have been slightly better, but you know what? I really don't care. I had fun. I was focusing on having fun. Now, since this whole thing was meant to be a dragon themed video, I have to address the dragons. Yes, we do have dragons in this world. The lore and myth related to them, the whole like them turning into moons thing when they die, it's a really nice concept. I really like that part of the dragon stuff we got in this book, but they're not really characters the way the dragons in Fourth Wing are characters. We get to see some dragons, we get to see some relationships between riders and dragons, but it's not as much of a main focus as it is in that story. I still think it was better than what we got in the other stories though, so there's that. You would go to Fourth Wing and When the Moon Hatched for two completely different vibes. We got some romance, that tension, that angst. I was theorizing every step of the way. That ending, we got some big reveals. And I know for a fact that I will be picking up the second book whenever it comes out, but we do not have a date yet. Madam Parker, set a date. Let us have it. So yeah, When the Moon Hatched, it was a fun read. So technically, if you think about this whole video, Fourth Wing and When the Moon Hatched are on the same-ish level for me. Like, I enjoyed them almost in the same way. I'm not going to say which one's better and which one's not, because I haven't settled on a solid rating for When the Moon Hatched yet. It always takes me a bit of time. Then we have Fear the Flames and Promised in Fire, which is both around 3 stars, in that range. I cannot pick one over the other. I mean, they were okay reads. Not a bad time, I wouldn't say. And then there was The Last Dragon King, which sadly didn't work out that well for me. But I mean, I still finished the whole thing. I read 5 fantasy romances for this video. Came out with 2 stories and 2 series that I want to continue with, which I am perfectly happy with. I like that result. I am very aware of the fact that this video is probably going to be quite long, and it's essentially me just sitting down and talking throughout the whole thing. So if you've stayed this long, my God, you're amazing. That's all I have to say to you. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for clicking on this video. Thank you for caring. And if you do enjoy this kind of stuff, you can always join the family, subscribe, click that notification bell. I'm in a good mood, in a good reading mood. Definitely gonna pick up something else now. Yeah, I'm just gonna finish the video. Okay, I love y'all. Have a good day. Have a good night. Just have a good time. And I'm thinking of you. I'm sending you lots of positivity and joy. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay happy, and I will see you very, very soon in the next one.